Scandal erupts after Coldplay concert. Astronomer CEO Andy Bryon and Kritin Cabot suspended over kiss. What really went down after that Coldplay concert? The shocking moment between CEO Andy Bryon and executive Kritin Cabot has sent shockwaves through the industry. In this explosive exposé, we break down the unexpected kiss between Astronomer CEO Andy Bryon and marketing head Kritin Cabot that led to their immediate suspension. Was it just a fleeting moment of emotion, or something deeper that had been brewing behind corporate doors? Get the full scoop, behind-the-scenes reactions, and what this could mean for the future of the company. What if I told you that in a single moment, just 8 seconds long, a kiss between two colleagues at a Coldplay concert could ignite a corporate firestorm, derail an entire tech company's future, and force some of the most powerful executives in Silicon Valley to go into hiding? This is not fiction. This is not a dramatized series. This is real. It happened in front of thousands. And the world is still trying to understand what exactly went wrong. It all began on a summer night in Santa Clara, California, when the air was electric with music, stadium lights lit up the sky, and Coldplay was halfway through their set list during one of their most intimate performances of the tour. It should have been a night remembered for art, music, and emotion. Instead, it became a moment that would live forever in slow motion. There they were, two familiar faces on the Jumbotron. Andy Bryon, the widely admired CEO of Astronomer, the AI-powered data company shaking up the tech industry. And Kritin Cabot, the company's brilliant and fiercely private head of marketing. They were seated side by side in the VIP section, smiling, laughing until the stadium's infamous kiss cam caught them. At first, there was polite laughter from the crowd. People pointed. Some clapped. Most expected the moment to pass as just another awkward corporate cameo. But then, something happened. Andy leaned in, Kristin didn't pull away, their lips met. Not a peck. Not a joke. It was unmistakable, long, intimate, and mutual, and in those seconds, captured by dozens of phones, replayed across the internet, and magnified by the blinding spotlight of Coldplay's stage, an entire career, a reputation, and a company's leadership structure would come crashing down. What followed in the next 48 hours wasn't just a PR crisis. It was a reckoning. By morning, the footage was everywhere. On Reddit threads, TikTok trends, LinkedIn posts, and in cold, calculated memos sent across Astronomer's internal server. The internet had crowned it #Kissgate. But inside the company? The temperature had shifted to panic. Why? Because Andy Bryon was not just any CEO. He was the CEO who promised a culture of integrity, who personally signed the company's zero-tolerance workplace romance policy, who built Astronomer into a $9 billion juggernaut on the foundation of discipline, transparency, and ethical leadership in the AI era. And Kristin? Her career was just as meteoric. The woman behind the rebranding campaign that tripled Astronomer's public visibility in less than a year. The strategist trusted with sensitive partnerships and keynote appearances. Until now, she had carefully avoided the spotlight, known for her brain, not her personal life. But now, the spotlight was blinding. Within 24 hours, both executives were placed on indefinite suspension. An internal investigation was launched, employees staged virtual walkouts, investors panicked. Clients called for answers, and amid all of it, the public watched, speculated, judged, and dissected every second of that kiss. But here's the real question no one's asking: was this really just a kiss? Because beneath that public spectacle is a much deeper story, one involving blurred lines, buried emails, secret office dynamics, and rumors that go back months, possibly years. Some say it was a spontaneous, emotional lapse. Others claim this moment was the tip of an iceberg Astronomer had desperately tried to hide. One anonymous source, a former Astronomer executive who requested to remain unnamed, told us, this was not a mistake. This was a cover being blown. A curtain being lifted. Everyone at HQ knew something was off for a while. But before we get into those whispers, let's rewind. Let's talk about who these people really are. Let's talk about the worlds they come from, the culture they helped build, and the very rules they may have just broken, because to understand why this moment matters, you have to understand what was at stake. Andy Bryon wasn't just a figurehead. He was a media darling. Forbes called him Silicon Valley's most trusted futurist. He gave TED Talks about ethical machine learning. He'd been invited to brief Congress on AI regulation. He had friends in tech, in politics, even in entertainment. A polished speaker with a calm voice and clean scandals, until now, Kritin Cabot was even more elusive. No Twitter. No interviews. Just a portfolio of campaigns that quietly turned tech firms into household names. She was, in every sense, a strategist. Calculated. Controlled. Some say brilliant. Others say cold. But no one ever called her reckless, and yet, here they were. Caught in a moment so careless, so public, so damning, that it instantly raised the question, what else were they hiding? Immediately, speculation exploded across the media. Was this a secret affair? Had they been dating in private? Were workplace policies violated? Did the board know? Was this retaliation for something deeper? Was someone trying to bring them down? Then came the second layer, the employees. Reports began to leak of internal Slack messages being deleted. Middle managers being told to stay quiet. HR teams scrambling to reassure the staff that all necessary actions were being taken. But the damage was done. Trust was broken, and in the background? Coldplay continued their tour, unaware, or perhaps all too aware, that their kiss cam had triggered a PR catastrophe. Let's pause for a moment, because in the age of social media, stories move fast. Outrage is viral. Context is often crushed beneath the weight of views and retweets, but this story is different. This isn't just about two people kissing. It's about the ecosystem around them. About the power they held. About the culture they helped shape. It's about what happens when the very people who set the rules are caught breaking them, and what that reveals about the systems we trust. As the dust began to settle in the days that followed, one thing became clear: this was no isolated incident. This was the beginning of a reckoning. Both for Astronomer and for the broader world of corporate accountability in the post-#MeToo, post-remote, digitally exposed era of work. A reckoning where every action, every glance, every message, every decision, is potentially public. Recorded. Scrutinized. And replayed for the world. So if you're thinking this is just another office romance gone wrong, think again. This is about perception versus reality. About power dynamics that hide in plain sight. And about the consequences that ripple far beyond a single moment of passion, because when a billion-dollar tech company begins to crack, it doesn't start with a data breach. It starts with silence. With complicity. With small rules broken in dark corners, until suddenly, the lights come on, and that's where we begin. In this exposé, we're going to take you deep inside the real story behind that Coldplay concert. We'll examine the moment itself, but also the years leading up to it. We'll hear from insiders, legal experts, former employees, crisis PR teams, even relationship therapists, and we'll ask the question that no one in Silicon Valley wants to answer out loud: how many more secrets are hiding in plain sight? This is not just a video about a scandal. This is about what happens when power, image, and impulse collide on the world's biggest stage, and how one moment of vulnerability can expose an entire empire. Stay with us. Because what comes next changes everything. Before the kiss, before the headlines, before the suspension, Andy Bryon was a name synonymous with brilliance. To understand the magnitude of what happened at that Coldplay concert, you need to first understand who Andy Bryon really is, not just what the public sees, but who he is behind the closed glass doors of Astronomer's headquarters, the private jets, the stage lights of global conferences, and the boardrooms where million-dollar decisions are made in silence. Andy Bryon wasn't born into power. He built it, with code, charm, and control. Born in 1982 in Palo Alto, California, Andy was the son of two academics. His father taught theoretical mathematics at Stanford. His mother was a pioneer in early neuroscience research. From a young age, Andy existed in the space between logic and innovation. By age 10, he was writing his own software. At 14, he hacked into the school district's grading system, not to change his grades, but to demonstrate its vulnerabilities. He was expelled. His parents called it a necessary rebellion. By the time he turned 19, Andy was on a full scholarship at MIT. He never graduated. He dropped out during his junior year after co-creating a predictive analytics tool that quietly attracted the attention of 3 hedge funds. That tool became the foundation of what would later evolve into Astronomer, an AI-driven data pipeline platform that promised to revolutionize how companies track and utilize streaming information in real time. In simpler terms, Astronomer told companies not just what was happening, but what would happen next. Andy didn't just build a product. He sold a prophecy.at first. He was the quiet co-founder, the introvert who rarely spoke during VC meetings. But when the original CEO stepped down in 2015 due to what was described as creative misalignment, Andy stepped up. What happened next was nothing short of meteoric. Within 3 years, Astronomer grew from a data startup with 12 employees into a Silicon Valley juggernaut with over 800 staff and contracts with Fortune 500 companies. By 2020, it was valued at $6.50 billion. And Andy Bryon? He became the face of responsible AI. He gave TED Talks on algorithmic bias. He wrote op-eds in The Atlantic on data ethics. He once turned down a $100 million military contract, citing a moral obligation not to build tools of surveillance or war. People called him the ethical Elon. Polished, articulate, and always composed, Andy was everything the tech world wanted in a new leader. He dressed in muted grays and sharp navy suits. He refused to buy a Tesla. He biked to work. His social media was curated to perfection, photos of bookshelves, dogs, speeches, but never a single personal detail about his relationships, family, or inner circle. And that's where it gets interesting, because behind that precision, sources say, was a man obsessed with control. Not just of his company. Of his image. One former assistant, speaking under condition of anonymity, said Andy would review every press quote before it went out. If a photo made him look even slightly tired or disheveled, it was gone. He didn't just manage his reputation. He engineered it like a product launch. He was known for one golden rule: don't become the story, and for 10 years, he succeeded. He avoided scandal while his peers crashed in public meltdowns. No leaked emails. No on-the-record controversies. When 2 other co-founders of major startups were accused of misconduct, Andy was seen as the contrast. Steady. Clean. Unshakable. But the truth is, unshakable people often break the hardest. Inside Astronomer, Andy's control extended far beyond branding. He handpicked executive hires. He personally signed off on every major client-facing product update. And, according to 2 sources from the engineering division, he reviewed internal communications channels quarterly. He always wanted to know where the risks were, one said. Not just in the product, but in the people. It's important to understand how this environment was both admired and feared. Employees were paid well. Very well. But the expectations were grueling. Missed deadlines weren't tolerated. Silence during meetings was seen as a red flag. Andy didn't yell. He didn't fire people in public. He just removed them. Quietly. Efficiently. He surrounded himself with loyalty, not challengers. And it was in this culture of precision, expectation, and silent scrutiny that Kritin Cabot was hired. But we'll get to her later. For now, let's talk about how Andy became the architect of Astronomer's code of conduct, including the very policies that now threaten to end his career. In 2021, following public outcry over several high-profile workplace relationship scandals in tech, including incidents at Google and McDonald's, Astronomer enacted one of the strictest internal ethics guidelines in Silicon Valley. Among them, any interpersonal relationship between individuals in a supervisory/subordinate dynamic must be disclosed to the Office of Ethics and Governance. Failure to do so may result in disciplinary action or termination. The policy had Andy's fingerprints all over it. In a leaked town hall recording, he was heard saying, "We cannot allow emotion to cloud logic. We build systems based on logic. We must reflect that in our behavior." At the time, it was applauded. The press called it forward thinking. Employees said it was strict, but necessary. Now, it's being re-examined under a burning spotlight. Because the very policy Andy implemented to prevent ethical compromise, may be the one that sinks him. Let's talk about that Coldplay concert again, not the kiss, but why Andy was there. It wasn't just a night out. It was a brand appearance. Astronomer had just closed a sponsorship deal with a music data startup that integrates live music feedback into AI sentiment models. Andy and Kristin attended as company representatives. The Coldplay appearance was supposed to be a safe, casual celebration of that milestone, but it ended as anything but casual, and now, the Andy Bryon who was once known for restraint, is facing consequences for too much emotion. The real tragedy here, some argue, isn't the kiss. It's the fall from grace, because whether you believe the kiss was harmless, or ethically irresponsible, what no one can deny is this. Andy Bryon was the last person anyone expected this from. He wasn't a party CEO. He didn't chase clout. He wasn't sloppy. He was disciplined, respected, and, until now, untouchable. But perhaps, that was the red flag all along, because when someone spends years building a fortress of perfection, there's always a question lurking beneath the surface: what are they trying to hide? And when that fortress cracks, not just from the outside, but from within, it's not just the individual who suffers. It's the entire system around them. In the days following the scandal, tech reporters began revisiting old interviews with Andy. Watching for signs. Rereading quotes. Looking for inconsistencies. One journalist pointed out a moment from a 2019 interview with Fast Company, where Andy was asked if he ever struggled with the pressure of being the most ethical man in tech. He paused, smiled slightly, then said, "No one is perfect. But I think if you build strong enough systems, people won't have to be." Maybe that's where the irony begins, because in the end, the system Andy built was strong, but not unbreakable, not against a human moment, not against emotion, not against a kiss. In every boardroom empire, there is always someone who moves quietly behind the throne. Not lesser in power, just less visible. That was Kritin Cabot. If Andy Bryon was the face of Astronomer, Kristin was its voice. She shaped the narrative, guided the tone, pulled the strings on every campaign, every press release, every keynote phrase that made investors believe and employees rally. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be unforgettable. And for a long time, she was exactly that, until she became something else entirely, the center of a scandal that now threatens to define her legacy. But who was Kritin Cabot before that fateful kiss? To understand her role in this story, we need to trace her footsteps. Not through the public photo shoots or stage appearances, but through the pages of resumes, quarterly reports, Slack conversations, and whispered office stories. Kristin was born in 1985 in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her father was a political consultant for Democratic candidates. Her mother, a media trainer for Fortune 500 executives. Kristin grew up in a house where every word was calculated, every dinner table conversation sharpened like a campaign speech. She learned early that language was power, and that silence, when deployed with purpose, could be lethal. By age 9, she was correcting grammar and political ads. At 13, she was reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War. By 16, she'd won a national high school debate competition with a closing argument so coldly precise that one judge called her terrifyingly brilliant. She graduated from Yale summa cum laude, then moved on to Harvard Business School, where she focused on strategic communications and behavioral psychology. Her thesis? A 140-page study on the long-term effects of tonal framing in corporate crisis messaging. In other words, she didn't just write press releases. She engineered perception. After stints at Ogilvy and McKinsey, Kristin landed her first major tech gig at a mid-size analytics company in Seattle. Within 2 years, she had helped reposition them as a market leader, secured 3 speaking slots at CES, and oversaw a rebrand that resulted in a 40% spike in B2B leads. Her reputation grew fast, but always behind the scenes. Coworkers remember her as a paradox, poised but cold. Supportive, yet always calculating. She never gossiped. Never mingled at after-parties. She kept a curated LinkedIn and an Instagram account with no photos of herself, just architecture, foggy landscapes, and quotes from classic philosophers. She was the kind of person who could sit across from you in a brainstorm, make you feel like your idea mattered, and then rewrite it overnight to make it twice as sharp, said one former colleague. You never knew where you stood with her, but you always respected her. In 2019, Astronomer poached her with an offer rumored to include a $2 million signing bonus, company equity, and total autonomy over its communication strategy. It was a bet Andy Bryon personally approved, and here's where their paths began to entwine. According to insiders, Andy and Kristin didn't just work well together, they understood each other. Both deeply private. Both obsessed with narrative. Both perfectionists with no time for messiness. They weren't friends, said one anonymous senior exec. They were allies. In the old-school sense. Like generals who respected each other's battlefield instincts. Kristin reshaped Astronomer's identity in under a year. She streamlined all internal messaging, rewrote the company's mission statement, and rolled out a branding initiative that made the company feel human, powerful, and inevitable. All without showing too much. She was often seen walking the halls with a leather notebook, never a laptop. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, people wrote it down. And yet, despite her power, she never craved visibility. She turned down media interviews, declined to join panels unless absolutely necessary. One journalist who interviewed her for Wired later revealed, she only agreed to be quoted if we blurred her face in the feature photo. I've never seen that before. She believed in controlled mystery. But the problem with mystery? Once the curtain is pulled, there's nothing to shield you, and when the kiss cam exposed her in front of 70,000 concertgoers and millions more online, Kristin's fortress of control crumbled in real time. The internet was brutal. People dissected her body language, called her a hypocrite. Some accused her of leveraging her position to manipulate Andy. Others claimed she was the real victim, caught in a moment engineered by someone more powerful. But here's what we know, Kristin wasn't naive. She was smart. Brilliant, even. And if she leaned into that kiss, if she didn't pull away, then the decision, like everything else in her life, was calculated. So what happened? Why would a woman so focused on precision, control, and privacy risk everything in the span of one moment? Some believe the answer lies in pressure. According to sources within Astronomer, Kristin had been under intense internal scrutiny in recent months. A failed branding partnership with a global logistics firm. A conflict with a rival VP. A delayed product rollout that, while not her fault, reflected poorly on her division. She was stretched thin, said one communications team member. She stopped coming to weekly huddles. She started missing deadlines. It wasn't like her. And then, there was the speculation, the rumors that Kristin and Andy were closer than they appeared. That late-night strategy calls had become more frequent. That she had stopped challenging him in meetings. That their dynamic had subtly shifted, from professional equals, to something else. Some of this may be conjecture, but what isn't conjecture is this: people were watching. Whispering. Waiting, and when the kiss happened, it confirmed every quiet suspicion that had ever been uttered behind closed doors. It's worth noting, Kristin never publicly confirmed or denied the relationship. Neither did Andy. Their legal teams have remained silent. No press conferences. No joint statements. Just a sudden vanishing act from two of the most powerful voices in tech. But here's where it gets more complicated. A recently leaked internal report shows that Kristin had, months earlier, submitted a request to revise Astronomer's employee conduct policies. Specifically, the section involving mutual consent in lateral reporting relationships. It was denied. The reason? Unnecessary policy revision. Current standards reflect company values. And the signature at the bottom of that denial, Andy Bryon. Could it be that Kristin tried to protect herself before the scandal erupted? That she foresaw what could come, and tried to build a lifeline? Or was the policy change a signal? A warning? We may never know. What we do know is this: Kritin Cabot was more than just a marketing executive. She was the strategist who helped turn Astronomer into a cultural force. The woman behind every headline, every campaign slogan, every clean and polished image of ethical tech leadership. And now, she's the face of a firestorm. It's ironic, really. The woman who spent her life controlling narratives, now caught in one she can no longer shape. The woman who silenced chaos with language, now silenced by scandal. But before you pass judgment, consider this. What does it take for a woman in a male-dominated world to rise as far as she did? What compromises are made in the shadows? What boundaries are blurred, not just between people, but between ambition, loyalty, and emotional vulnerability? Kritin Cabot may have fallen. But before she did, she stood at the top of a structure she helped build, and in this story, she's not just a character. She's a mirror reflecting the uncomfortable truth that even the most brilliant minds can lose control when the heart disrupts the equation, and when that happens, not even a perfectly engineered silence can protect you. It was supposed to be just another stop on Coldplay's Moon and Stars Stadium tour, a summer evening drenched in neon wristbands, ethereal vocals, and 1,000 little phones flickering in the dark like constellations. The kind of night that makes people believe in music again. July 14, 2025. Levi Stadium, Santa Clara, California. The sun had just set over the Bay Area when the gates opened. Nearly 70,000 people streamed in, some in Coldplay shirts faded by a decade of loyalty, others in branded lanyards and sleek tech casual fits. It was a diverse crowd, but there was a noticeable presence that night: Silicon Valley executives, investors, tech media. Something about Coldplay always attracted the polished, the optimistic, the image-conscious. And tonight, Astronomer was in the spotlight. As part of an ongoing collaboration with PulseSynQ, a startup blending biometric data with AI-powered audience engagement, Astronomer had arranged for a corporate section near the front left VIP zone. The partnership aimed to test how emotional intelligence from live audiences could be harnessed to train prediction models. It was bleeding-edge tech wrapped in soft pop ambience, and at the center of it, seated side by side in row A, were AndyBryon and Kritin Cabot. They arrived quietly. No entourage. No cameras trailing them. According to a staff member working the floor, Andy wore his usual gray jacket and black tee, while Kristin was in a minimalist navy dress. They greeted two members from the PulseSynQ team, then settled into their seats. Most in the audience, they were just well-dressed spectators. Those in the know? Their presence was strategic. This wasn't just a fun night out, said one source close to the project. Andy and Kristin were there to seal the perception that Astronomer was human-centered, relatable, emotionally in tune with the future. Coldplay's set began just past 8:15 p.m., following an opening act by a rising alt-soul group. The band launched into their signature blend of anthemic tracks and visual storytelling. LED bracelets synced with beats. Holographic stars floated above the crowd. Drones mimicked fireflies in formation. And just before intermission, during a sky full of stars, the stadium screens cut to a live feed of the audience. The kiss cam had begun. For the uninitiated, it's a harmless, light-hearted break during concerts and sports games. The camera finds couples in the crowd, encourages a kiss, elicits a cheer, and moves on. It's cheesy. It's innocent until it isn't. 3 couples had already been featured. Each gave the audience a giggle, a cheer, a sense of warmth. Then, the camera lingered for a second, and cut to Andy and Kristin. This day, no one is certain whether it was random or orchestrated. Some claim a concert producer, recognizing the high-profile guests, selected them deliberately for PR buzz. Others argue it was an algorithm-based crowd scan targeting VIP rows. Whatever the truth, what happened next wasn't accidental. At first, you can see Andy look surprised. He glances up at the Jumbotron with a flicker of hesitation. Kristin gives a nervous smile. The crowd, likely unaware of who they were, begins clapping lightly. A few people whistle. Stadium etiquette kicks in, just play along. But then Andy leans in, not fast. Not impulsively. Almost cautiously, Kristin meets him halfway, and for nearly 5 seconds, an eternity in kiss cam time, they lock lips. Not dramatically. Not theatrically, but undeniably. The camera lingers. Then cuts away. The crowd cheers. On stage, Chris Martin doesn't seem to notice. The music swells, and in that moment, the world begins to tilt, just slightly. What most people didn't realize at the time was that dozens of audience members were already filming. The Jumbotron was mirrored in real time on social media. And within minutes, clips began surfacing. Did anyone just see that? Pretty sure that's Astronomer CEO on the Kiss cam, read one tweet at 8:54 p.m. Another TikTok video, tagged hashtag Coldplay Santa Clara, racked up 500,000 views in 2 hours, simply captioned, "Tech royalty caught slippin' eyes." It might have stopped there, except, people recognized them. Unlike celebrities, tech leaders aren't often in gossip headlines.